Ukraine recapturing every square centimeter of Ukrainian territory and evicting the Russians, all Russians from Ukraine. That would be a total victory. Victory doesn't necessarily come like that. Wars don't necessarily come like that. So it may be that a 60%, a 70%, an 80% solution would be good enough. What is critical is that the Ukrainians recapture enough ground, enough of their own territory, to ensure that Russia cannot in future prey on them and be a long-term security threat. However, even if that happens, we have to assume Russia will continue to be a threat to Ukraine and a threat to Europe, because there will be no peace in Europe while the bloodstained autocrat Putin is in the Kremlin or a lookalike takes over from him. And that places an imperative on NATO to gear up for a long-term generational deterrence of Russia.
The news is in. Germany is approving the supply of tanks to Ukraine. We don't have numbers, and that's crucial. But what do you make about the situation so far?
Well, it's taken a heck of a long time. These tanks were needed months ago, frankly, from all European nations and the Americans, because what the Ukrainians need to be doing now, and I'm sure they're planning this carefully, is preparing to launch an offensive as soon as the weather gets better. And you need to train tank crews, you need to get the logistics in place, you need to get all the other paraphernalia of combined arms equipment that support tanks, and you need to plan and you need to rehearse. So it's good news if they have approved it. It would be really much better news if there's 200 going and like yesterday. But we have to be satisfied if there is a firm decision, because this procrastination has gone on far too long.
Yes, I mean, the numbers are absolutely crucial, aren't they? We're waiting for the big push to come in the spring, whether first from the Russian side or Ukraine taking the initiative, and the weight of armament. That's going to be crucial, not just whether or not there are tanks on the battlefield.
It is crucial. Equally crucial, of course, is logistics. It's professionals, amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics. So this is going to be critical. But armor and tanks are really important, because you cannot take ground, recapture ground, unless you put your infantry on it and you kill, capture, or force the withdrawal of the enemy who's occupying it. And the only way you're going to get them forward is under armor, protected mobility, led forward and supported by tanks in the direct fire battle. Yes, of course, attack helicopters, air, and all the other long-range precision missiles are critical. But when it comes to mixing it with the enemy, tanks are fundamental.
Now, tanks they're needed in numbers. What about the American position? Because the Americans, of course, have their Abrams tank, a heavy advanced tank. They haven't been very keen so far to supply Abrams tanks either, have they?
No, they have not. But on the other hand, America has provided by far the greatest weight of arms, ammunition, and very high capability precision missiles like HIMARS. I mean, let's be clear. The M1 Abrams is a superb tank, and it would be very, very well suited to operating in the eastern steppes of Ukraine. But it's a serious gas guzzler. It's got a gas turbine engine. It's heavy. It's got a huge logistic demand. And I think the logistic demand on the Ukrainians would unbalance their forces. So Leopard, 2,000 or so in Europe. The Germans have got something like 200 in storage. And it would be easy to train Ukrainian crews to use it. And of course, it's here. It's on this side of the Atlantic. So it makes much more sense for the Germans to provide their tanks. And of course, let's be clear, it would be very good if the British could provide more. The British have taken the lead with 14 Challenger 2, but that's only a squadron's worth. We need to see at least 2 or 3 battle groups worth of Challenger 2 tanks. But the truth that needs to be told, which government ministers are unwilling to acknowledge, is that the evisceration of the British armed forces over the last 20 years means that there is precious little in the cupboard.
I saw an argument in one of the arguments on the subject on social media, which grabbed my interest as very much a military layman. I wonder what your thoughts are on this. It was pointed out by this commentator that Jordan has a large force of Challenger 1 tanks, obviously the precursor to the Challenger 2, and they could be bought for comparatively little and supplied to Ukraine, which would provide pretty much a division of tanks. What about that as an idea? Might that be an answer to the problem, or at least a partial answer?
I commanded the Challenger 1 tank squadron in the first Gulf War. It's a very capable tank and more than a match for anything the Russians have got with its night sights and the sort of ammunition it's got. So that would be certainly an answer, a partial answer to the problem.
I wonder why it hasn't been picked up then. It just sat there as an isolated suggestion on social media. No one else seemed to be talking about it.
Well, we don't know whether it has or hasn't taken it being picked up, and of course, there may be discussions between the Jordanians and the Allies as well. So, I can't comment.
No, good point. There may be conversations going on that we don't know about. We may be talking about that very idea in a few days or a few weeks. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, obviously the Ukraine concerned with its efforts on the front line, but on the home front at home, a row about corruption in the Ukrainian government, and the president Volodymyr Zelensky has had to take a big initiative, firing a government minister, sacking others. They were engaged, it seems, in corruption. Now that's pretty corrosive, isn't it, as an idea in eroding faith in Ukraine, just at a time when it needs all the help that it can get from friends and allies.
It does. It does. I mean, let's be clear. We weren't born yesterday, and it's probably no surprise. But full marks to President Zelensky for getting a grip of it.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how far a thing like that would prey on policymakers' minds around Europe, in America, and among Ukraine's friends. Because as you say, they weren't born yesterday. We know that Ukraine had its problems, quite serious problems, before the war broke out.
Absolutely, and I'm sure that this is a time not to do. This is a time to help Ukraine resolve its problems, internal problems, and continue to lean in to provide the equipment and weaponry they need to beat the Russians.
Yeah, give me an overall perspective, General, on these coming months. I was speaking yesterday to another respected expert, Robert Fox, who's the defense editor at The Standard, but a defense commentator of many, many years standing. He was looking at a war that was going to stretch well through next year, maybe well beyond that. There are hopes, among others, that we could see some sort of turning point and a conclusion, possibly one which is favourable to Ukraine in these coming months. What's your feeling? What's your guess?
I think I respect Robert's view. Frankly, it all depends on how much of the weaponry and equipment that Ukraine needs can be provided. If the Ukrainians get 100% of what they need and quickly, then I think there is a very real chance that they could defeat the Russians in 2023. If they don't, and it's a sort of mathematical equation, if they get 60%, then the proportion of ground they capture goes down. And if they don't get what they want, Robert could well be right that this could stretch well into 2024. That highlights the imperative of giving them what they need and now and quickly.
When you reflect on the possibility of a Ukrainian win, what does that win look like in your mind?
It looks like Ukraine recapturing every square centimeter of Ukrainian territory and evicting all Russians from Ukraine. That would be a total victory. Victory doesn't necessarily come like that. Wars don't necessarily come like that. So it may be that a 60%, a 70%, an 80% solution would be good enough. What is critical is that the Ukrainians recapture enough ground, enough of their own territory, to ensure that Russia cannot in future prey on them and be a long-term security threat. However, even if that happens, we have to assume Russia will continue to be a threat to Ukraine and a threat to Europe, because there will be no peace in Europe while the bloodstained autocrat Putin is in the Kremlin or a lookalike takes over from him. And that places an imperative on NATO to gear up for a long-term generational deterrence of Russia.